Congress is back at it. The scramble is on to cram a terrible solution to the problems Congress itself created and then ram it down our throats. Again, we must accept the impoverishment of our great-grandchildren so that elites in Washington can live high on the hog today. For 28 years straight and counting, the United States Congress has ignored the law and not completed a legitimate budget, using what's called, regular order. That's 12 appropriation bills debated and passed by both houses and sent to the president. Instead, the Congress has abdicated its duty to our nation by putting overspending on autopilot, resulting in $37 trillion in debt and counting. Our debt is so high. How high is it? Interest on the debt is $1 trillion every year. In 2023, U.S. taxpayers paid $4.4 trillion in taxes. 25% of it's gone to the interest on the debt alone. Now the Congress is talking about another continuing resolution, a fake budget. That translates to continuing to overspend more money that we don't have and growing the national debt even more. Out of the hundreds of billions of dollars in savings articulated by DOGE, Congress has codified only $9 billion in savings for U.S. taxpayers. Meanwhile, the GOP-controlled Senate just got off vacation. Isn't that delightful? And while they were out, Senator Chuck Grassley admitting that Democrats and some select Republicans are colluding to stymie over 130 Trump nominees to key positions in government. I'm assuming this is an attempt to keep the feckless and irresponsible scam that has become the federal establishment going. Senators like Mitch McConnell, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and John Cornyn, they're intentionally dragging their feet, waiting President Trump out so they can get back to corrupt business as usual. Heck, Susan Collins is opposing President Trump's use of a rescission power to scrape back a measly $5 billion for the U.S. taxpayers. Then there's the whole Epstein thing, and we're learning about yet another federal agency that isn't accountable to our elected leaders or us in any way. It's obvious that Washington needs an aggressive and radical return to strict adherence to the U.S. Constitution. Now, President Trump, he never stops working for the American people, even foregoing his vacation. But does Congress have the will and the love of this country exhibited by our president? Let's talk about this with the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman James Comer. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to have you here, sir. I'm going to get to the fiscal matters and the performance of the legislative branch in a moment. But on the Epstein matter, here's an NBC panel of victims that seem to back what was told to you by Ghislaine Maxwell in your effort for transparency on the Epstein files. Watch.
I do have to ask, and I know, and it's just something that I think we're compelled to at this moment, with the attention on President Trump, with these questions around a pardon. Did anybody see or hear of the president himself doing anything inappropriate as it related to Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Wow, no. Tell us about the efforts of Congress at transparency. And what's the end game here? Congress can't prosecute anybody. Does this effort that Congress is undertaking bring the victims any closer to real justice?
I hope so. And we met privately yesterday on the Oversight Committee in a bipartisan manner with Republicans and Democrats with 6 victims and their attorneys. And, what became apparent is this has been ongoing for 30 years. This dates back to 6 presidential administrations. Many of these women claim they've given interviews and depositions to FBI leaders and people in the Department of Justice, but time and time again, no one was ever prosecuted. So they wish that not only is their story told and the truth come out, but also that people are held accountable, the ones who broke the laws. You have many of these women said they were teenagers, under 18, when they were groomed by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and then ended up in bad situations with, according to them, many wealthy, prominent people around the world. Now, one thing that continues to be a recurring theme is Donald Trump's name was never mentioned in any of this. And I think the Democrats have already demonstrated that their sole concern in this whole Epstein saga is to try to somehow find some dirt on Donald Trump when it doesn't appear that there's any dirt there. And what Donald Trump's done is he's disclosed the Epstein files. He's already turned over 34,000 files to the Oversight Committee. We published them online last night. We expect to get more documents in over the next few weeks. So we're providing transparency. The next step is to try to hold some of these people accountable and figure out in the government who failed these victims of human trafficking by not prosecuting their perpetrators.
Right, sir. And, you know, I think President Trump has played the Democrats on this. But really quickly, before I get on to the president, is it your hope that all of this transparency will finally get the Department of Justice off the stick to actually do something after 30 years?
Yes. Look, that's my biggest takeaway thus far from meeting with the victims and from reviewing the documents from the Epstein files is that these women have been pleading for help for decades. And our government has failed them. And you wonder how many other people were failed by our government. We know during the Biden administration that the border was wide open and that there were record numbers of young girls who were being human trafficked and sex trafficked. And the Biden administration turned a blind eye. But what's troubling is to see that there are people in the Department of Justice and in the FBI, which is under that have just turned a blind eye to this behavior. Now, is it because these were prominent people, or is it because they were politically connected? I don't know, but we're going to try to find out. And I think the American people want to know, and I applaud President Trump for being the first president in the last 6 administrations to actually disclose Epstein documents.
Well, yes, and he did do that. But the president also was insisting that this whole focus on Epstein, that you already alluded to, is a Democrat hoax. So listen to what he said earlier today.
So what they're trying to do with the Epstein hoax is get people to talk about that instead of speaking about the tremendous success like ending 7 wars. I ended 7 wars. Nobody's going to talk about because they're going to talk about the Epstein whatever.
Now, the victims, as you articulate, of Epstein are very real, and we know the president knows the victims are real. So in your discussions with the president, what has he indicated to you? What does he mean by that it's a Democrat hoax?
It's a Democrat hoax because all their focus is on Donald Trump. They are trying to create a false narrative that Donald Trump was somehow involved in the shenanigans that were taking place on Epstein Island. They're trying to create a narrative that Donald Trump is covering up this investigation and preventing transparency to try to protect either himself or some Republican donors. And that's just not true. Donald Trump has been transparent. He's ordered Pam Bondi to give us the files on the Epstein list. You know, there are tens of thousands of pages. We've already gotten 34,000 pages. There are a lot more. We're uploading them all. We're reviewing them to make sure that none of the victims' names are disclosed because most of the victims don't want their names disclosed. They've moved on. They have families. They have children now, and this is a very troubling part of their past. So the president has mentioned that, and the Democrats have said, "Oh, he's trying to protect people. He's trying to protect the victims." So I think Donald Trump's done everything right here. He's trying to be transparent, and we're working with him on the Oversight Committee. And I think the American people want to know, and I want to know. I want to know who the people were that were going to Epstein Island. I want to know names of people in our government that failed these women.
Yeah, I want justice for those over 1,000 girls. Let's get on to some other business, Mr. Chairman. Americans are finally waking up to the fact that the Federal Reserve is an unaccountable agency that doesn't answer to our people or our representatives. Now, with this from a federal judge revealing another unaccountable bureaucracy, the Federal Trade Commission. They have ordered the rehiring of a Biden appointee after President Trump fired her. The U.S. District Court in D.C. assumed the role of the chief executive and rehired Rebecca Kelly Slaughter. Seems to me, Congressman, that Congress has some work to do. First, in bringing accountability to yet another rogue agency that the American people have been brought up to speed on, and also reining in an equally rogue judiciary, which the GOP Congress simply refuses to do. Where am I going wrong on this?
You're absolutely right. And you said something in your monologue that is absolutely right. The American people, especially conservatives, especially people watching your show right now, need to demand with their member of Congress that we consolidate these government agencies. You have a president in Donald Trump that wants to look at these agencies that have duplicative services, agencies that are excessive levels of bureaucracy, unneeded levels of bureaucracy. I think the Federal Reserve, and you mentioned the Federal Trade Commission, they are bloated beyond imagination. We need to consolidate agencies. We need to reduce the size of government. Government has a role. But when you look at agencies like the Department of Education, we have state departments of education. We don't need a U.S. Department of Education. The Federal Reserve has grown beyond what its intended purpose was, like every other government agency. So we need to work to pass precision bills to reduce unnecessary spending, and we need to consolidate these government agencies and eliminate the size of the federal government. There are Republicans up here that want to do that, but we don't have enough. And we need more, and I think if the American people pressured the Republicans to do this, that now that we have a willing president, that maybe we could get some of this done.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you and I have talked openly and frankly about Congress's feckless and reckless overspending on numerous occasions. Americans are now on the hook for, what, $37 trillion in debt, and having 25% of our tax revenue we give to the folks in government just eaten up by interest payments alone. The Democrats have never been fiscally responsible my entire life. It seems your party, sir, doesn't have what it takes to be good stewards of our money either. If we can't vote Democrat and we can't vote Republican, where can Americans turn for some fiscal sanity in this government?
Well, the Republicans are a whole lot better option than the Democrats. Look, I haven't met a Democrat in Congress that wants to cut anything. You mentioned the rescissions package. That was just $9 billion. $9 billion when we're spending $2.5 trillion more than we will take in this year. $9 billion, and not a single Democrat voted for it, and they acted like the world was going to end. The same with the big, beautiful bill. We made some reforms to Medicaid that will reduce waste, fraud, and abuse. It didn't necessarily cut Medicaid spending. We're going to still spend more on Medicaid next year than we did this year. But you would think that the Republicans were ending life as we know it. Look, we're trying to bring some fiscal sanity here, and that big, beautiful bill did it. The rescissions bill did it. These are baby steps. They're not enough, but it's more than the Democrats have offered. In fact, the Democrats, not only do they not want to cut spending, they want to significantly increase spending. So there's a big difference in the parties. Republicans need to do a lot better, but the Democrats are right now a lost cause.
Congressman Comer, it is always a pleasure to catch up with you, sir. Don't be a stranger. We'll talk again soon. You know, folks, I thank God for my wonderful wife, my kids, my country, the greatest nation ever. And Americans like you who believe in the truth, the Chris Salcedo Show will never stop fighting for you.
The Chris Salcedo Show, for the news you need to know.